And we begin with breaking news from Ukraine, where 25 people have reportedly been killed in the east of the country in the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk. The Kremlin-installed authorities blame Ukrainian forces for shelling a busy area with many shops and a market. There has been no immediate comment from the government in Kyiv. And let's get more on all these developments from DW correspondent Nick Connolly in the Ukrainian capital. Nick, what more can you tell us?
So we have seen from sources from Russian occupying authorities there in Donetsk, they are talking of 20 plus casualties and a similar number wounded. We obviously are not able to verify those numbers. As you mentioned there hasn't been any comment yet from the Ukrainian side. It has to be said that this is pretty unusual if it were to work out in terms of the numbers. Donetsk, for all the fact that it is basically on the front lines and has been so since 2014, sees relatively light civilian casualties, especially compared to Ukrainian cities like Kharkiv and Dnipro. This seems to have been in a market on the western side of the city, so towards those front lines. Right now there are pretty gruesome pictures doing the rounds on social media. So the expectation is that we'll know a bit more in the hours to come.
Okay, Nick, I want you to stay with us, but there was another incident I'd like to talk about. In Russia, a suspected Ukrainian drone attack has caused a fire at an oil storage depot in the Baltic Sea. The terminal owner said the blaze was caused by what they called external influence and that some operations have been suspended. The port is located just outside of St. Petersburg. Ukraine claimed responsibility for two separate attacks on Russian oil depots earlier this week. And we will go back now to Nick Connolly standing by in Kyiv for us. What do you know about the suspected Ukrainian drone attacks inside Russia, of which this could be a part, I suppose?
Well, we already have had Ukrainian special service sources quoted in the press here taking responsibility. That's not the same as an official kind of hands up, but certainly that is the belief here in Kyiv. I think these targets have long been on their list. If you look at what Russia has done to Ukraine in terms of closing off or trying to close off the Black Sea, destroying the terminals needed for Ukraine to export its grain and thereby weaken Ukraine's economy, its ability to pay for its military, I think it's been clear for a long time that the Ukrainians would try to do the same thing. And it's kind of particularly important given that Russia's exports of oil and gas by pipelines have basically been very hard hit by sanctions, but the export by sea of oil but also of gas that has been liquefied, that is still going and is crucial to the Kremlin's finances. So that certainly has long been something the Ukrainians have tried to do, and it does seem like this was more successful than previous attacks. We've seen attacks where maybe a fire was very localized, you'd have one reservoir of fuel burning, but people more or less working in parallel a few hundred meters away. That definitely doesn't seem to be the case based on the images on social media we're seeing from that facility in Ust-Luga.
And what strikes me, Nick, is just how far this is inside Russian territory. It's 1,000 kilometers away from Kyiv to go to St. Petersburg. What does that tell us? I know it's early days about Ukraine's abilities if it can strike so deep inside Russia.
Well, that certainly also has been something that's been worked on a lot, something that was clear to the Ukrainian side would have to happen. Attacking places along Ukraine's frontiers is comparatively easy, but it's also less politically dangerous for the Kremlin. But reminding Russians as far away as Petersburg, as you said, almost 1,000 kilometers away from Ukrainian territory, that they are living in a war zone, that is something that is also going to be crucial from a Ukrainian perspective for changing the mood in Russia, to get people conscious of the fact that this is something that could damage them and that isn't just some kind of colonial war somewhere far away, but also in terms of the ability obviously to slow down Russia's war machine. If Ukraine is only operating in a kind of 100-kilometer strip along its borders, then that doesn't really make much of an impact. But most of Russia's infrastructure, its economy, is in that European part of the country that it is within about 1,000 kilometers of Ukraine. So certainly this makes a big difference, and there have been huge fundraising drives by Ukrainian volunteers to try and come up with new drones that are capable of making that kind of distance, and it seems potentially that this has worked.
Okay, Nick Connolly reporting for us from Kyiv. Thanks so much for those insights.